Last season, the NHL was absolutely insane. We got to see next to no fans still in the stands, a surprise Cinderella run by Montreal, the rise of Kirill Kaprizov, and even a back-to-back championship by Tampa Bay. But at the tail end of the year, one of the most bizarre events would take place, causing one team to go into defense, while the other team would completely empty house. We're talking about the game that took place on May 3rd between the Washington Capitals and the New York Rangers in Madison Square Garden. The Rangers are pretty much out of playoff contention, but Washington is already a lock. So basically, this game meant nothing for both sides. But no shocker here, Caps Tom Wilson will be mentioned. For the very few who don't know, Wilson is a known troublemaker who has already had a long history with the NHL Department of Player Safety. In total, Wilson's faced 5 suspensions and had to pay 2 hefty fines for his actions on the ice that gives him a sour reputation. Wilson often gets under the skin of his opponents as a way to get inside people's heads, but it seemed as if that night, something snapped, as when a scrum would occur in front of Washington's goal, Tom Wilson would go absolutely insane.
Van Riemsdyk with a terrific play on Buchnevich. Now they're pounding Buchnevich on the ice. Oh boy, Wilson. This is ridiculous.
This would be the headline for the next several days, as what Tom Wilson did could have been extremely fatal. Wilson punched Buchnevich in the face, but when Panarin decided to stick up for his teammate, he would get absolutely ragdolled by Wilson, being pulled down by his hair and repeatedly punched until stopped by a linesman. Immediately, everyone was calling for a suspension, and some even wanted him banned for the upcoming playoffs, and honestly, I could see why. But fans would be enraged when it was announced the following day that Wilson would only get fined $5,000, and it wasn't even for the hit on Panarin, it was for the Buchnevich swing. Things got so heated that the Rangers themselves would release a statement claiming George Parros wasn't fit for the role of head of player safety, and would also state that Panarin will be out for the remainder of the season. New York would then decide to clean up shop by firing their general manager and head coach due to what most people believed was because the team wasn't tough enough. Wilson soon became public enemy number 1 in New York, and the team would be set to face off one more time that year. The rematch would be one of the most anticipated games of the year, as the tension was rising by the minute, and as soon as the puck dropped, chaos would erupt. Things got so bad that half of both teams' benches were in the penalty box, and the refs had to warn the coaches that if they didn't discipline their players, things could get bad. Wilson would get targeted so many times throughout the game that he would actually have to leave the game with an injury, facing instant karma. Even though the Rangers would lose, they still stuck up for Panarin. And this past offseason, it seems as if they aren't quite done with Wilson. They would acquire multiple enforcers to fill out the roster, including Wilson's best friend and worst nightmare, Ryan Reeves. So maybe this was just a beginning. Luckily, this year, the fans can see it happen live, and you can too, using the power of SeatGeek. SeatGeek is an app that allows users to purchase tickets to games, concerts, and live events. SeatGeek makes buying tickets simple as they rate them on a scale from 1 to 100, so you know you're getting a good deal. If you haven't already, use my promo code IDGT at checkout to save $20 off your first purchase. Thanks so much for SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. Now let's resume where we left off. When Wayne Gretzky got traded to the LA Kings during the summer of 1988, it sent shockwaves throughout the NHL, as no one could even imagine a player like Gretzky could ever get traded. So when the news broke, millions were in complete and utter shock. The Oilers were fresh off their 4th Stanley Cup victory in 5 years, and it looked like the sky was still the limit. So trading Wayne made little to no sense to many. Wayne seemed pretty blindsided as well, as his emotional press conference said it all.
I wouldn't do this.
With Gretzky out of Edmonton, many wondered what was next, and how the Great One would do in a new city. The Kings were a big market franchise, and by acquiring Gretzky, it made hockey out west generate more exposure. But Wayne still knew he had a job to do, as his goal was not just to win a cup, but to get revenge on his former franchise. Throughout the following season, both teams would be competitive. Gretzky's Kings would see a massive improvement, and the Oilers, even without the Great One, remained surprisingly good. Once the year was over, both teams would make the playoffs, and of course, Gretzky and his Kings' first round opponents would be none other than his former team in Edmonton. Wayne now had his chance to show the Oilers what they were missing, and this series series went down to the wire, towards the end that is. Edmonton would come out with a commanding 3-1 series lead and pushed LA on the cusp of elimination. But then Gretzky happened. He would score 2 goals in the next 2 games, tying the series, and in a pivotal Game 7, Gretzky got the last laugh.
Not cleared. Now it is cleared. Here's Gretzky with an empty net. Gretzky, he shoots, he scores!
LA would win the game 6-3 and come all the way back to win the series, helping Wayne get his revenge on his former team. The Kings would lose the following round to Calgary in 4 games, but the impact Gretzky's win had over Edmonton was massive at the time. Another player in today's video is hoping to also seek revenge on his former team, and that player made history. Back in 2019, the Canadiens, still in need of center depth, would make a decision that stunned the hockey world. They would go to Carolina for help, but not in the way you'd expect, as they would submit an offer sheet for the young star Sebastian Aho in hopes that he would sign with the team. And he did, until Carolina matched it. Montreal even released a statement beforehand stating that Aho was committed and wanted to join the team. Keep that in mind as the story continues. Now, fast forward to present day, and the Dustin Penner signing is still the last offer sheet to not be matched by the opposing team. Until now, that is. The Hurricanes this time around wanted to make a splash, and after already having some questionable moves during this offseason, they wanted to get back at an old foe, the Montreal Canadiens. Habs centerman Jesperi Kotkaniemi had yet to be signed by the club and was able to be offer sheeted, so Carolina, due to the Aho attempt 2 years prior, decided to do a little trolling. They would offer a 1-year, $6.1 million deal, but didn't think the team would let him get away with it. But the funny thing is, Montreal didn't tenure the offer sheet, making Jesperi Kotkaniemi a Carolina Hurricane, all thanks to the team's pettiness against Montreal. If you think that's funny, just look at Kotkaniemi's signing bonus that he got with his contract. He got a $20 signing bonus. You know who wears number 20 on the Hurricanes? Yeah, Sebastian Aho. And when it was announced that Kotkaniemi was officially a Cane, the team took to social media, quoting the exact same quote Bergevin used to describe the Aho situation from 2 years prior. Offer sheets can really make GMs upset, and sometimes they never forget. Just ask Brian Burke. But the Canes were able to get the last laugh, getting revenge through a free agent signing.
The Boston Bruins here today, but here's Lucic into the zone. Drops it off and a high shot. Sails over the shoulder. Oh, one of the Bruins just got blasted. Matt Cook, the hit just as that shot was released.
This would be the hit that would change Marc Savard's entire career. That season with the Bruins, he was having another solid season and was still a contributor on the offense. But after facing this nasty hit from known pest Matt Cook, he would never be the same player he once was. The date was March 7th, and the Penguins were facing off against the Bruins when Marc Savard would get bulldozed near center ice by Penguins tough guy Matt Cook. Cook's reputation was already stained up till that point, but after the brutal Savard blindside, he would be destroyed by fans from all over. Savard would suffer from a concussion, and because of the hit, the NHL would enforce stricter rules on blindside hits altogether. He would return for the 2010 playoffs, but would develop post-concussion syndrome during the offseason, which would eventually lead to the downfall of his career. The Bruins were obviously pissed at this, as Savard was a solid contributor, so to get back at Cook, one man knew he had to take matters into his own hands.
As soon as he came on, he and Sean Thornton. Down goes Cook, and Thornton continues to pound away at him despite the fact that he's down.
Meet Sean Thornton. Thornton was a notorious tough guy who had fists of steel, and he put Matt Cook in his place. This fight was the ultimate revenge moment for the Bruins, as they would get back at Cook for ruining the career of their beloved teammate. Savard's name would be put on the cup when the team won the following season, and he would actually suffer another massive blow by Avs D-man Matt Hunwick, derailing his career for good. Unfortunately, he was never the same player he once was, but luckily, he had great teammates who cared for him and proved they always had his back. For this last moment to make sense, we need to go back. Once again, this involves the Penguins and Bruins, and once again, the Penguin would be the one committing the blow. But this happened back in 1991, and during the Stanley Cup playoffs, with Bruins Cam Neely racing up the ice, Ulf Samuelsson would connect a knee-to-knee check that caused Neely to immediately go down to the ice. This moment would be significant as it would lead to the downfall of Neely's career. Samuelsson was already known as, quote, the most hated man in hockey and the lowest form of a human being. So to see something like this come from Samuelsson sadly wasn't surprising. What was surprising is what the Czech did to Neely's body, as Cam would develop myositis ossificans, which made his muscles in his knee turn into bone. Well, years later, Samuelsson would get his karma, but not by Neely, by another foe, who was also tired of having to deal with Samuelsson's antics. That man was Ty Domi, and he took matters into his own hands, giving out the ultimate revenge moment for many others who couldn't face Samuelsson themselves.
Oh man, that's just a flat-out sucker punch by Ty. That's brutal. That's brutal.